Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Forgotten Scriptures podcast. This is episode 2, The Ladder of Jacob. I'm your host, Shotgun Angel, and today we are going to be going through another very obscure, and in this case, very mutilated document. Unlike the last text we examined, the Apocalypse of Sirach, while that text did have Christian interpolations and editing, this document is probably one of the most hard to understand and comprehend documents that we're going to be covering in this entire podcast history. And we're kind of doing this early, aside from texts that are completely lost. This is one of those very weird ones and very hard ones to discuss. I hope you all are doing fine. I myself am recovering from a bout of allergies. I have terrible allergies. And I'll probably be clearing my throat and probably sneezing and coughing and going into convulsions about 90% of this entire episode. But I have coffee, I have my books, and I have my will to keep the podcast going, so hopefully the added effect of my voice becoming richer and deeper will make the podcast even better. All right. And before we begin, just want to note that this podcast is available on YouTube. It's available on Spotify, iHeartRadio. Let's see, where else do I have this at? I can't even remember where I have it at. There's one more. Amazon Music. There you go. And there's one other more obscure one. I just added it to, and I can't even remember the name. But anyway, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. Now, if whatever platform you're listening on, I deeply appreciate it if you could take the time to go and subscribe to the YouTube channel, comment, support, do all the algorithm stuff, basically. And for Spotify, go ahead and follow the podcast and rate it and do all that fun stuff. It would really help. But most importantly, beyond all that, sharing is the most important aspect of getting this show out there. And the basic reason is for me, I want people to learn about this material, and I want this podcast to become big enough to where I can start kind of making a dent into the very dense, recapitulated world of extra-biblical material and biblical literacy as well. And I'm hoping this podcast can do that. And that's the ultimate goal so far, and the main goal ultimately. But thanks to everyone who so far has supported the podcast and helped it get it going, and has viewed it and done everything along the lines I've already described from beforehand. But I'm rambling now. I'm still wondering if you can hear me drinking my coffee, because I have my mic really close to my face. I didn't check the last time I did this, so who knows. More free ASMR, post-cold Shotgun Angel rambling about nonsense. Alright, so we're going to be looking at a text I recently just actually read and examined, and I am perplexed by this situation here as a document. And this text is called The Ladder of Jacob, circa the 1st century AD, and I'm reading, was when this was likely written, and I'm reading the translation, and the introductory material is by H.G. Lund. This is also in the Old Testament Pseudepigrapha. This is in Volume 2, which is the expansions of the Old Testament, and legends, wisdom, and philosophical literature, prayers, psalms, and odes, fragments of lost Judeo-Hellenistic works. It's the second volume of that collection. So I'm unaware if there actually been any updates on the study of this text. If there is, I'm actually probably going to make a smaller run-up episode explaining that, because at the moment I am unaware of any updates, as this publication was from the 80s. So I could be completely wrong, but as far as I know, there have not been any advancements. I don't think there would be, unless we discovered some extra material, as we'll see why. Now, the ladder of Jacob is a common term that people know about. But before we begin, I'm actually going to read the original source of the concept or the idea of the ladder of Jacob, and that's from Genesis 28, 10 to verses 10 to 22. And this is where this text is going to actually be relying upon, is this passage in Scripture in Genesis. And I'm reading from the ESV here, the English Standard Version. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he came to a certain place and stayed there that night, because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it, and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go. And I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep, and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So early in the morning Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar, and poured oil on the top of it. And he called that name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you will give me, I will give a full tenth to you. So that is the narrative of Jacob's ladder. And this narrative, of course, takes place after Jacob flees his brother Esau after he has stolen his birthright. And this is a visionary experience, fairly unique to Genesis, actually, such vividness of one of the patriarchs having a dream like this. And in this dream, he sees a staircase, a heavenly staircase, much like a ziggurat, and actually will come up later, how ziggurats functioned as a gateway to the heavens or the heavens to the earth. And he sees these malakim, the malak, the angelic messengers of Yahweh, coming down and going up into heaven. Of course, the world was viewed as flat at that period, and so God is on top of the firmament. And this celestial staircase, in a sense, makes a lot of sense to a person. It's not going up to a portal. This is not a science fiction portal. This is an ancient description of how Jacob himself would have understood a vision. Basically, how the vision would appear to Jacob would be a ladder or a staircase going up into the heavens. And this is where the divine comes and goes. And this is the house of God. And of course, this is where the covenant that was made to Abraham and to Isaac is renewed with Jacob, the third generation. And this plays a very important part in the Jacob cycle in Genesis. But this text we're going to be reading is actually based upon that passage. But that is probably going to be the most. This is probably going to be the most simple part of the podcast. From this point onward, everything is going to go downhill and crazy. So I'm going to read the introduction here, and from H.D. Lunt, who translated this document. And prepare yourselves, because here we go into the convoluted mess of this ancient Jewish text called the Ladder of Jacob. The Ladder of Jacob has not survived as an integral text, even in a form as unsatisfactory as that of the Apocalypse of Abraham, but is known only from what was utilized in the Slavonic Tolkavaja Peleja, or explanatory Peleia. In retelling the tales of the Old Testament, the Slavic editors of the Polea made many changes in the text they used. They excised, they rearranged the order of sentences, paragraphs, or sections, and most important, they modified wording in order to fit the text into the anti-Jewish commentary interspersed in the canonical and non-canonical episodes they were explaining. Moreover, they freely united heterogeneous materials, often with little consideration for narrative flow or logical connections. Therefore, we must treat the ladder of Jacob with the utmost caution. At best, our reconstruction of the text must be controversial in many details. For the moment, however, given the lack of careful study of the manuscript witnesses and inaccessibility of many of them, we can only give a preliminary approximation that will serve as an introduction to the problems. The original Slavonic version of the latter was modified in slightly different ways by two traditions in the history of the Polea text. Recension A is the more conservative, but is marred by the omission of the continuous text after chapter 7, verse 9. Recension B was severely edited in a part of the narrative, while other passages appear to show harmonization with the commentary. Both have before chapter 1 verse 8 an obvious insertion whose purpose is to elucidate the Septuagint version of Genesis 28:13. In Recension B, the major portion of Jacob's account, chapter 2 verse 3 to chapter 5 verse 1, is reduced to a banal prayer and the matter-of-fact appearance of a nameless angel who starts to explain the vision. Otherwise, Recension B continues through the end of chapter 7. A, on the other hand, abruptly moves from the middle of chapter 6, verse 9, to the commentary that in B follows chapter 7, verse 35. There is nothing to indicate that this omission was a real editorial decision. It is possible that our three copies go back to a model based on a defective manuscript. In any case, the commentary jumps back to offer brief and haphazard interpretations of these chapters, and then a much more detailed and discernibly organized exegesis of chapter 7. So if you could follow all that, basically, this document has come down to us in one form. It has been inserted, modified, corrupted, chopped to pieces, blended, turned inside out, upside down, mutilated, and butchered in a document, a Slavic text, a medieval Slavic text called the explanatory Polea. And the form that it has survived in is atrocious. As he has noted here, it has been modified in various ways. Why? Because the document is concerned with anti-Jewish polemic, and the document that is being concerned here is a Jewish text, which is being taken as truthful to these Christian authors, but they have modified the text to fit their scheme, and so this is a very poorly preserved text, as it's not in its original form, but basically in bastardized quotations. As he notes here, the commentary begins as such. It says, "Understand, Jew, how the Lord explained to your father Jacob." In Recension B, the introduction is longer. "Have you heard this well, you who have not recognized the truth, O Jew, how the Lord explained so-and-so." So, like he said here, probably all comes from a defective manuscript and have been copied over and over again. And basically, the text has barely survived. Continuing the commentary, or the introduction, chapter 7 is probably to be regarded as a separate work. It is connected to the latter only by means of a grammatically incongruent sentence referring to the angels descending and ascending, otherwise contains no identifiable reference to Jacob. And he'll point this out later. So that chapter 7 of the work is another text that is unrelated and was probably added to the Slavic document later. I'm going to skip the synopsis. I don't want to spoil it yet. And I'll go over the manuscripts. And this was actually acquired during the Soviet Union era by a certain, I'm going to probably say this wrong, Ryszard Rubinkowitz, who acquired this material and managed to get it to the West during the 70s and 80s. So there are three recensions: recension A, B, and C. And I'm just going to go through this really quick. So there is recension A. There are three manuscripts: S, R, and U, from 1477, from 1494, and 1517. Those are the year. I believe these were the years that these were written down. These are all the explanatory Polea, Rominastev Polea, and the Undolsky Polea. Recension B has 13 manuscripts. K, the Kolomna Polea of 1406. V1, manuscript 83 of the Public Library, Vilnius, folios 139 to 43, 16th century. I'm just not going to read through all these. This is very boring. V2, which is from the same library of the 16th century, so that's the 1500s. M, the Melek Monastery collection from the Ukrainian Academy Library. This is from the 17th century, so that's the 1600s. And P, the Solovki Monastery collection. And I don't believe he gives a date for that one. 1877? Perhaps. St. Petersburg, 1877. There's a lot of Slavic here, so this is in a very hard to read format. And then there is no, this is where it was published. Okay, yeah. So the Solovki Monastery collection from Leningrad. Recension C, as he says here, is a brief extract of little interest on folio 30 of the Polea of 1414, Library Academy of Sciences, Leningrad, so forth. And then there was a German translation that was made. The present translation, he says, is an eclectic text based mostly on manuscript C from recension A. But of course, we're also going to be looking at the other recensions and manuscripts that help inform our barely informed state of this document. And I'm going to kind of skip through this. The author believes that it was originally written in Greek by an author who had some knowledge of Hebrew. And so this Jewish author was writing to a Greek-speaking Hellenistic audience. So he says after going through all this data, he says if all this is so, we can posit an originally Jewish text written down in Greek but intended for readers with at least some knowledge of Hebrew. Later it was translated into Slavonic at some point. He says right here, the explanatory Polea is a compilation from many sources, but nearly all of the component parts of variant redactions go back to the Old Church Slavonic translations made in the Cyrillo-Methodian period in AD 863 to 87, and the subsequent flowering of Byzantino-Slavic culture among the Slavs of Macedonia and Bulgaria for several generations after 890. Right? So this is late medieval period. This was probably translated into Slavonic before the destruction of the Bulgarian state, as he notes here in 1018 by the Byzantines. And again, he believes it's Greek, so we already covered that. And there are also Hebrew words in the text. So there's a kind of a Jewish Greek kind of text. So a very similar. Let me see. What would this be similar to? This could be similar to how Revelation, the book of Revelation, is written in Greek, but with a very Hebraic mentality. The Apostle John wrote in Greek, but thought in Hebrew, is the way this is put. As he notes here, he says the date and provenance of the latter are unknown. And he mentions that the church father Epiphanius in his Against Heresies mentions a ladder, a anabathmoi, or anabathmoi, there we go, steps, not climax as we would expect, as he notes here, of Jacob. But this is seemingly a different text that talks about the temple and sacrifices and so forth. So this is a different ladder of Jacob known to the church father Epiphanius. He notes here, this is a very, we'll actually get to this. This is kind of spoiling it, concerning the date and provenance. He says, the enigmatic Kilfelkan Gargalayuya, I said that right the first time, of 515, that's a concise, continuous word, must somehow be connected with the lawless Falcon of chapter 6, verse 13. Perhaps the association with Leviathan provides a clue. So this word, this word and this other figure called the lawless Falcon appears. In Isaiah 27:1, Leviathan is described as the crooked or twisted serpent. The Hebrew, and this is without the vowels. It's the consonants. The NHSQLTWN, how you pronounce that in the original Hebrew, uh, is present, and the usual epithet may have been taken as a proper name and spelled in Greek, with a loss of the initial ayin, Kalthon. A mechanical transposition of letters would produce Falcon, and the East Slavonic confusion of the letters theta and phi would yield Falcon. In the apocryphal life of Saint Pancratius of Taormina, a pagan god named Falcon was cast into the sea by demons at the command of the saint. Perhaps this legend influenced the form of the name of the latter. We may surmise that the second element is connected with the Greek stem gargalizine, tempt, seduce, and conjecture that the original text was alluding to the crooked or lawless tempter Satan. And the chapter 7 appears to be a portion of the narrative that was added later during the Slavic period, and it's unrelated. And it draws its material from a text, a Christian text called "The Explanation of the Events in Persia," and a section called "The Tale of Aphrodisianus," which actually has to do with the wise men, the three magi, and Persia, and a misunderstanding of Zoroastrian religion. And this will come up. We'll come up to this later when we reach chapter 7. And that's a separate topic. Here this is a good way. This is good right here. He says that we can speculate reliably only on a final steps of the transmission of the ladder of Jacob. So we really don't know the history of this text early on. Only until the medieval period do we finally start getting an idea of what this is or where it was. 1. A Jewish story composed in Jewish Greek for a Palestinian audience. 2. Transmission of this text in Byzantine circles with inevitable distortions, ending up with a Greek copy available by about 8900 to a Slav. Step 3. Translation into Old Church Slavonic. And 4. Utilization of copies of this old translation by Russian editors as they elaborated various redactions of the Polemics in the 13th and 15th centuries. He goes through here, and this section is actually written by Charles Worth himself and the footnotes of the text. We'll actually come back to this, so I might just skip this section here because we will actually return back to this because this is on the theology of the text, and we'll stop that there. So there's your rambling introduction to the Ladder of Jacob, and now I'm going to begin actually reading it. And I'm going to call out chapters this time. Well, I failed to do so in the last section. The Ladder of Jacob. Jacob, here I go, I'm already messing up. The Ladder of Jacob, chapter 1. Jacob then went to Laban, his uncle. He found a place, and laying his head on a stone, he slept there, for the sun had gone down. He had a dream. And behold, a ladder was fixed on the earth, whose top reached to heaven. And the top of the ladder was the face of a man, carved out of fire. There were 12 steps leading to the top of the ladder, and on each step to the top there were 2 human faces, on the right and on the left, 24 faces or busts, including their chests. And the face in the middle was higher than all that I saw, the one of fire, including the shoulders and arms, exceedingly terrifying, more than those 24 faces. And while I was still looking at it, behold, angels of God ascended and descended on it. And God was standing above its highest face, and he called to me from there, saying, Jacob, Jacob. And I said, Here I am, Lord. And he said to me, The land on which you are sleeping, to you will I give it, and to your seed after you. And I will multiply your seed as the stars of heaven and the sand of the sea. And through your seed all the earth and those living on it in the last times of the years of completion shall be blessed. My blessing with which I have blessed you shall flow from you unto the last generation. The east and the west, all shall be full of your tribe. So here we have a section which, and I'll go back to what I was saying earlier. All of this has been scraped and dissected from the atrocious state of the text in the Pelea. So while I'm reading this, it might sound very clean, but this is because it's been stitched together, and there actually will be sections where stuff is going to kind of start falling apart, and corruption of the text. So, for example, it's the text actually goes from third person to first person. It speaks of Jacob going to Laban, his uncle, and then it says, "I was looking at it." So now we're speaking of Jacob. So again, there's what's that about? That's very peculiar. As he notes here, this would be Charlesworth speaking now in the footnotes. We follow, and this is let's see, where did he footnote this? This is at the beginning here, after the words he had a dream. He says, "We follow to Ravov in beginning the ladder of Jacob here, a decision supported as far as we know by only one manuscript." That's V1. The preceding material in the Pelea tells of Esau's murderous anger and Rebekah's advice that Jacob flee to Laban. The wording is essentially Genesis 27. 41b to 45, slightly altered in sequence. Nothing remains of Genesis 27:45 to 28:9. In the oldest manuscripts for Recension B, there is no hint of a subdivision here or nearby. Recension A, however, with two manuscripts of B, make a break after dream in verse 2 and provides a heading concerning the latter. Manuscript S has a miniature showing the sleeping Jacob and God appearing behind a craggy mountain, but oddly enough, no ladder. It is probable, in view of the first-person narrative from verse 6 on, that the ladder of Jacob originally began with Jacob's own account of events that brought him to this place. So again, this might not be from the original ladder of Jacob. This is this beginning portion, and of course we have a miniature of him not with the ladder, because that's what you do. So Jacob, this is continuing what we saw in the original Genesis document. But when Jacob falls asleep, he sees a ladder, and he says here, I'm getting caught off guard here. When he says a prosopon in the sense of bust or portrait, we retain the traditional ladder, although surely this is rather a solid staircase, aligned with statues as in a ziggurat. So imagine a staircase here, even though we have the word ladder. So he sees a ladder ascending up into heaven. Well, I just said staircase. He sees a staircase ascending up into heaven, fixed on the earth, and on the top of it was a fiery human face. And there were 12 steps to the top, and God is at the very top. And on the left and right side of each step was a pair of human faces, or human statues with their chests. Okay, this is definitely sounding like a drug trip. So now we have these statues, these busts on each side of the staircase, 24 in total, and there are angels descending and ascending. And of course, and then God gives his blessing to Jacob, like we see in Genesis. And after the statement ascending and descending, he notes here, at this point, there is an insertion starting with the beginning of Genesis 28:13 in inexplicably Septuagint form, and the Lord was established on it. A short commentary on this phrase follows, then reference to the angels ascending, identified as Gentiles, and descending, the Jews. This is the only interruption of the text up to 6:8. So this is part of that anti-Jewish polemic where they're interpreting the Jews as the ones going down on the ladder and the Gentiles going up. This is part of that the anti-Jewish polemical substrata of this text that was introduced part in commentary and so forth. Chapter 2. And when I heard this from on high, awe and trembling fell upon me. And I rose up from my dream, and the voice still being in my ears, I said, "How fearful is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." And I set up the stone which had been my pillow as a pillar, and I poured olive oil on the top of it. And I called the name of that place the house of God. And I stood and began to sing. And I said, "Lord God of Adam, your creature, and Lord God of Abraham and Isaac, my fathers, and of all who have walked before you in justice, you who sit firmly on the cherubim and the fiery throne of glory." And the text is corrupt here, so it breaks off and continues, "And the many-eyed ones, just as I saw in my dream, holding the four-faced cherubim, bearing also the many-eyed seraphim, carrying the whole world under your arm, yet not being borne by anyone. You who have made the skies firm for the glory of your name, stretching out on two heavenly clouds the heaven which gleams under you, that beneath it you may cause the sun to course and conceal it during the night, so that it might not seem a god. You who made on them a way for the moon and the stars, and you make the moon wax and wane, and destine the stars to pass on, so that they too might not seem gods. Before the face of your glory the six-winged seraphim are afraid, and they cover their feet and faces with their wings, while flying with their other wings. And they sing unceasingly a hymn, there's text is corrupt again, whom I now, in sanctifying a new song, text is corrupt once again, 12-topped, 12-faced, many-eyed, fiery one, a lightning-eyed, holy one, holy, 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 Yao, Yahovah, Yaoil, Yao, Kados, Chavad, Savayoth, Omlemlech, Il Avir, Amismi, Varich. Eternal King, mighty, powerful, most great, patient, blessed one, you who fill heaven and earth, the sea and abysses, and all the ages with your glory. Hear my song with which I have sung you, and grant me the request I ask of you, and tell me the interpretation of my dream, for you are a God who is mighty, powerful, and glorious, a God who is holy, my Lord and Lord of my fathers. Okay, that was something. Now, in this prayer, right beforehand, let's see, should I read this? Yeah, I'll include that right here. He says, "From here," this is after the statement, Jacob saying, "The voice still being in my ears, I said." He says, "From here through chapter 5, verse 1, the text is preserved only in A. B has a poorly constructed condensation as follows, quote, Lord, creator of all creation, and again, Lord, God of Abraham and of Isaac my father, and God of all who have walked in justice before you, behold, I saw a terrible vision, trembling fell upon me. But remember, Lord, my forefather Abraham, how he walked before you in innocence, and in all ways fulfilled your commandments. And also my father, your servant Isaac, did not disobey your commandments. Therefore, Lord, look on me mercifully and on your servant, and explain to me this vision, this terrible one I have seen. And while the word and prayer were still in Jacob's mouth, behold, an angel of God stood before him, saying, Jacob, I have been sent to you by the Creator of all things, to tell you of your dream. Put this announcement of your dream in your heart." So that's that. So he sets up the pillar, and then he sings a song, and it's mentioned in the introduction earlier that probably a lot of this hymn is missing, this prayer and hymn. So he invokes God of the three patriarchs, who sits firmly on the cherubim in the fiery throne of glory. So there is the Merkabah and the cherubim. And there's a corrupted little portion of the text here. Where which then he's mentioned the many-eyed ones. So this is referring to the probably the Ophanim, who are the wheels within wheels in Ezekiel, holding the four-faced cherubim. There's the four faces from Ezekiel, bearing also the many-eyed seraphim, which are also many-eyed, carrying the whole world under your arm, yet not borne by anyone. Then it describes how he created the world, how the moon and stars are made in such a way as to show that they are not gods, the sun and moon and stars. Before your face of your glory, the six-winged seraphim are afraid, and they cover their feet and faces with their wings, which is, of course, being borrowed from Isaiah. And the text is corrupt again in 2 spots. But then he begins describing God. He calls him 12-topped. And this could mean 12-crested, which is interesting. 12-faced. He describes God as 12-faced. Many-named, fiery one, lightning-eyed, holy one. Holy, holy, holy. It's from Isaiah 6. And then these Hebrew names, which are been corrupted, Ya'o, Ya'ova, Ya'o'il, and Ya'o. Now, I'm assuming that the Ya'o that occurs twice is probably coming from Yah. I'm assuming is where this is coming from, the short form of the name of God, Yahweh. Ya'ova is probably coming from Yahweh, which you also have Jehovah. And Ya'il probably comes from Ya'el, which was another title for God, and also of the second power, the angel Ya'el. This is another rabbit hole in the Apocalypse of Abraham. He then calls him Kadosh, Kavad, and Savayoth. Kavod is likely a corruption of Kadosh, meaning holy in Hebrew. Kavod could be written. He says here, all copies written with an abbreviation mark, obviously understood by scribes as Christa Vod, Christ of the waters. So they misunderstood that greatly. Surely the Hebrew Kavod, glory, in the sense of the theophanic cloud. So the glorious Savayoth, which is from the Hebrew Sabaoth, which means the Lord of hosts, of the King of the hosts, of the angelic armies. Limlek, probably distorted Hebrew Melech, king, perhaps plus Olam, which would mean ages, so king of ages, or the king of the age. Il Alvir, the Hebrew El Abir, Lord Bull, or mighty Lord, so like El Shaddai, for example, like El Abir, the mighty Lord. Amismi, there's a variant that is Amimis, probably contains the Hebrew Amis, strong, firm, or courageous, and Varich, probably from the Hebrew Baruch, blessed. So that's a possible interpretation of what all these names and titles are. Then he calls him Eternal King, Mighty and Powerful, Most Great, Patient, Blessed One. He calls him to interpret his dream. So again, very, very interesting description of God having 12 faces and 12 topped, which is peculiar. Chapter 3. And while I was still saying this prayer, behold, a voice came from before my face, saying, Sariel, leader of the beguiled, you who are in charge of dreams, go and make Jacob understand the meaning of the dream he has had, and explain to him everything he saw. But first bless him. And Sariel the archangel came to me, and I saw him, and his appearance was very beautiful and awesome. But I was not astonished by his appearance, for the vision which I had seen in my dream was more terrible than he, and I did not fear the vision of the angel. So this is the angel Sariel, and Sariel is an angel who appears in the Second Temple period, but is eventually replaced by the angel Uriel. And this will actually come up in a later text, which I'm actually going to cover after this, because it will tie in. It will actually tie in. Maybe not the next episode, but I'm going to be covering it eventually. Called the Prayer of Joseph. This will actually tie in an odd way. It has to do with the angel Uriel. Sariel appears in the book of Enoch, and later Sariel was replaced by Uriel as one of the 4 holy angels, or one of the 7 holy angels. Interestingly, here, this angel is the leader of the beguiled, and it says here the Slavic uzlazdemics, literally sweetened, but here surely for Greek katathelko, enchant or charm, with a negative sense, delude or deceive. So maybe someone in a ecstatic state, maybe, is what we're dealing with here. Enchanted or charmed, which is what Jacob would be right now after having this vision. Chapter 4. And the angel said to me, What is your name? And I said, Jacob. He announced, Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but your name shall be similar to my name, Israel. And when I was going from Pandana of Syria to meet Esau my brother, he came to me and blessed me and called me Israel. And he would not tell me his name until I adjured him. And then he said to me, As you were Kepzul, And then the text is corrupt again. So here, the Hebrew Sariel, all that it takes, so if the transposition of one letter becomes Israel, so in Hebrew. So in Hebrew, it's S-R-Y-L. In Israel is Y-S-R-L. So all you have to do is move the Y to the beginning instead of the middle of the word, and it becomes Israel. So this is the origin of the name of Israel. And this event occurs also in Scripture, where he wrestles with an angel who, in the text, is the second power again. This is the mysterious human-like figure who is God, but not God in the same way of Yahweh. Uh, this gets into Christophanies and lots of other stuff. But later interpretations understood this figure as either Uriel, or in this case, the angel Sariel, who he would be replaced, who is replaced by Uriel, and his name is similar to Sariel, hence Israel. And then Fandana of Syria is coming from Padan Aram, which is of Aram is of Syria. And then the text is corrupt here. It says, as you were Hepzul. And he says right here in manuscripts R and U, Kapzul. Presumably more detailed discussion of the angel's name has been deleted. So what is Kapzul? No idea. It's completely corrupted. Chapter 5. Thus he said to me, you have seen a ladder with 12 steps, each step having 2 human faces, which kept changing their appearance. The ladder is this age, and the 12 steps are the periods of this age. But the 24 faces are the kings of the ungodly nations of this age. Under these kings, the children of your children and the generations of your sons will be interrogated. These will rise up against the iniquity of your grandsons, and this place will be made desolate by the 4 ascents. Through the sins of your grandsons. So there's a lacuna here after the statement 4 ascents, so there's a gap, corruption. Through the sins of your grandsons. And around the property of your forefathers a palace will be built, a temple in the name of your God and of the God of your fathers. And in the provocations of your children it will become deserted by the 4 ascents of this age. For you saw the first 4 busts which were striking against the steps. Another lacuna in the text, or the corruption. Angels ascending and descending, and the busts amid the steps. The Most High will raise up kings from the grandsons of your brother Esau, and they will receive all the nobles of the tribes of the earth who will have maltreated your seed. And they will be delivered into his hands, and he will be vexed by them. And he will hold them by force and rule over them, and they will not be able to oppose him until the day when his thought will go out against them to serve idols and to offer sacrifices to the dead. Another corruption here. He will do violence to all those in his kingdom who will be revealed in such guilt, both to the highest man from your tribe and Kafelka Nagargael Yuya. Know, Jacob, that your descendants shall be exiles in a strange land, and they will afflict them with slavery and inflict wounds on them every day. But the Lord will judge the people for whom they slave. Alright, so that's a lot to take in. So what the interpretation of this vision that Jacob actually saw is that the staircase, the ladder, is a description of world history divided up into 12 periods. Now, there is one other text that does this, of dividing world history into 12 periods, and that's the text known as 2nd Esdras or 4th Ezra. And the world's history is divided up into 12 periods as well. But also the busts, these busts and these images of these figures are pagan kings who will oppress Israel, and they are somehow aligned with this chronology of world history as the author saw it. And there's also mentioning here, the Most High will raise up kings from the grandsons of your brother Esau, and they will receive all the nobles of the tribes of the earth who will have maltreated your seed, and they will be delivered into his hands, whoever he is, and he will be vexed by them, and he will hold them by force and rule over them, and they will not be able to oppose him until the day when his thought will go out against them to serve idols and to offer sacrifices of the dead. So this describes Edomite rulers, which is interesting. And it also mentions the temple, And exile, the Jewish exile into Babylon, is also mentioned here because of the sins of his grandsons. He says here, positing instrumental plural vokshodi, the majority reading is shodi, descents. The word means going up, in various senses, including stairway, and its exact meaning here in verse 9 below in the Apocalypse of Abraham is obscure. It is used in an early version of Ezekiel 9:3 to render the Greek athrion, referring to the threshold of the temple. If this is the case, F.M. Cross Jr. suggests it may be taken as a boundary. To enter the Holy of Holies, one must cross 4 thresholds and make 4 ascents, while in leaving it would be 4 descents. For the descent or abandonment in chapters 42 and 48, for the ascent or return. So these 4 ascents are somehow connected with the ascents of this. The 4 ascents of this age become deserted, so this might have to do with God leaving the temple, and also 4 rulers. Now the problem is we don't know who these rulers are. They're pagan kings, so we can assume that these are Babylonians and maybe Greek rulers, but we don't know who they are exactly because the text is so hopelessly corrupt, and so we do not know what exactly is going on here. But there's this broad view of history where the Jewish people are given a temple, are ruled over by pagans and exiled because of their sins, and the temple is destroyed. And there will come a time with Edomite rulers. Now that's very interesting because that sounds very much like the Herodian dynasty, Herod the Great and Herod Archelaus, Herod Antipas, Herod Agrippa I and II. And this might be a reference, and this would show that the text was certainly written in the 1st century, is discussing Edomite kings who receive the people who vexed Israel, which is interesting. It notes here, but also it also notes that the 4 of these busts were striking something, striking the let me see here. Exactly the exact wording, striking against the steps, which is an odd statement. Again, we don't know what that means because the text is so broken and we don't really understand. And then the other statement, it says here, A, recension A, has no verb, but the genitive of the dead has with no clear context. B has that they may sacrifice to the dead with appropriate dative. Neither recension has a clear connection to the following do violence. There must be something missing. So, what is this about sacrificing to the dead? And who is he? Who is they will not be able to oppose him until the day when his thought will go out against them to serve idols and to offer sacrifices to the dead. Very obscure. And then we have he will do violence to all those in his kingdom who will be revealed in such guilt, both to the highest man from your tribe and Kafelkanangargalayuya. And this, I didn't laugh that time, this was mentioned earlier. In recensions S and R and U with recension A omits the final ya, the ya portion of the name, but starts with the next verse with the conjunction a, and, or but, and A omits the initial K. So it'd just be folk, not folk. Folk. Probably equating it with the preposition to, deemed inappropriate in the context, meaning possibly crooked tempter, i.e. Satan. So this is a corrupted, hopelessly corrupted text that has kafolka gargalayuya, which is probably just means the devil, in short. Chapter 6. And when the king arises, so we have another king here, judgment too will come upon that place. Then your seed Israel will go out of slavery to the nations who hold them by force, and they will be free from any rebuke of your enemies. For this king is the head of all revenge and retaliation against those who have done evil to you, Israel, and the end of the age. For bitter ones will rise, and they will cry out, and the Lord will hear them and accept their plea. And the mighty one will repent because of their sufferings, for the angels and archangels will hurl their bolts of lightning before them for the sake of the salvation of your tribe. and you will gain the mercy of the Most High. Then their wives will bear many children, and afterward the Lord will fight for your tribe through great and terrible signs against those who made them slaves. He filled their storehouses, and they will be found empty. Their land swarmed with reptiles and all sorts of deadly things. There will be earthquakes and much destruction, and the Lord will pour out his wrath against Leviathan the sea dragon. He will kill the lawless falcon with the sword, because he will raise the wrath of the God of gods by his pride. And then your justice will be revealed to Jacob, and that of your children who are to be born after you. And he will walk in your justice. And then your seed will sound the horn, and all the kingdom of Edom will perish together with all the peoples of Moab. So we have a final apocalyptic scene here, where a final king arises, who is apparently this face carved out of fire, at the top, who is at the top of the ladder at the end of history, after all these pagan kings, who actually is a kind of messianic figure. When we come to this point of judgment on the nations, interestingly, in the statement "for bitter ones will rise," it notes here the Slavic "gorchi bo vystanuti," A and B "gorchi vystaneti na dja." I'm probably pronouncing this horribly because I can't speak Slavonic. Quote, "bitterly will he rise against them." In the commentary, the subject Pharaoh is added. So Pharaoh is thrown in here in some other sections. And he notes here, after that, at the words, "the Lord will fight for your tribe," he says, "from this point through the end of the chapter, the text in both recensions is embedded in commentary. It may have undergone special editing." So it's probably been corrupted as well. And then we have the lawless falcon again that shows up. Not the falcon gluga, but just falcon. And again, it's just based upon what we see in Isaiah, being the sea dragon being slain by the sword. But he also describes storehouses being empty, women bearing many children, lots of reptiles, in the pagan nations, Edom and Moab, being destroyed, angels throwing lightning bolts, and the end of the age, which the author probably expected in his own lifetime. And this is usually what causes these texts to discuss these apocalyptic themes, are usually because the author believed the world would come to an end in their own day. So this could hold the belief during the time of the Herodian dynasty. This would mean before AD 70, when this text was originally written, that they were expecting a messianic king who will bring judgment upon the pagans. In this kind of messianic king. And it's not made clear if he's Jewish or not. And we actually do have sources from the Sibylline oracles that some Jews expected possibly a Ptolemaic pagan messianic figure, which is quite odd. But I don't think that's what's being said here, but maybe it is. I don't know. Again, the text is so corrupt. It's just very vague on what's actually going on. But yeah, that is that. And so the text, as it stands, ends. And that is the ladder of Jacob. But what comes afterward is chapter 7. And I'm going to read the note here before I read the actual chapter. Chapter 7, which comprises about 1/3 of the Ladder of Jacob, was compiled by a Slav as part of the anti-Jewish commentary of the Polemics. Apparently, his principal source was the Slavonic version of the tale of Aphrodisianus. Presently, it is not clear whether Chapter 7 was intended as an addition to the Ladder of Jacob, or was written originally as a separate polemical exercise. Syntactically, this verse is not properly connected with either the preceding or the following. In A, the text is embedded in commentary, but in B, it is separate and then repeated in the commentary. Note that unlike Genesis 28, descending comes first. This surely symbolizes Christ's descent to earth, introducing the idea of incarnation, which clearly is the theme of the chapter. Now, in this text, this story called the Tale of Aphrodisianus, it talks about the Persians, these Zoroastrians, but they were understood as fire worshippers or pagans, who have gods. And these gods begin shaking and giving voice, as it says here, and speaking, and prophesying about a Messiah. right? And their magic fails and so forth. And these magi travel and follow a star, and this is part of the Christmas story, the nativity narrative. And this is actually included in the narrative here in a condensed form from the tale of Aphrodisianus, this late Christian legend about the Magi, and put into this text, but with some unique material, as we shall see. Chapter 7. As for the angels you saw descending and ascending the ladder, so they're trying to like connect it into the story, even though this is a separate material. In the last years there will be a man from the Most High, and he will desire to join the upper things with the lower. And before his coming, your sons and daughters will tell about him, and your young men will have visions about him. Such will be the signs of the time of his coming. A tree cut with an axe will bleed. 3-month-old babes will speak understanding. A baby in the womb of his mother will speak on his way. A youth will be like an old man, and then the expected one will come, whose path will not be noticed by anyone. So this is talking about Christ coming. This is a prophecy, Christian. This is a Christian prophecy after the Jewish text. It is interesting to note, though, I don't recall a tree bleeding, 3-month-old babies speaking, and a baby in the womb of its mother will speak on his way, which is interesting, and a youth will be like an old man. These are odd prophecies that are believed to take place during the time of Christ himself, which in his first advent. Then the earth will be glorified, receiving heavenly glory. What was above will be below also, and from your seed will bloom a root of kings. It will emerge and overthrow the power of evil, and he himself will be the Savior for every land, and rest for those who toil, and a cloud shading the whole world from the burning heat. For otherwise the uncontrolled will not be controlled. If he does not come, the lower things cannot be joined with the upper. At his coming, the idols of brass, stone, and any sort of carving will give voice for 3 days. They will give wise men news of him, and let them know what will be on earth. By a star, those who wish to see on earth him whom the angels do not see above will find the way to him. Then the Almighty will be on earth in body, and embraced by corporeal arms he will restore human matter. And he will revive Eve, who died by the fruit of the tree. And then the deceit of the impious will be exposed, and all the idols will fall face down, for they will be put to shame by a dignitary. For because they were lying by means of hallucinations, henceforth they will not be able to rule or to prophesy. Honor will be taken from them, and they will remain without glory. For he who comes will take power and might, and will give Abraham the truth which he previously told him. Everything sharp he will make dull, and rough will be smooth, and he will cast all the iniquitous into the depths of the sea. He will work wonders in heaven and on earth, and he will be wounded in the midst of his beloved house. And when he is wounded, the salvation will be ready, and to end all perdition. And the end to all perdition, For those who have wounded him will themselves receive a wound which will not be cured in them forever, and all creation will bow to him who was wounded, and many will trust in him. And he will become known everywhere in all lands, and those who acknowledge his name will not be ashamed. His own dominion and years will be unending forever. And thus ends chapter 7, and ends the ladder of Jacob, properly if we include the appendix added by a Christian author later. Of note, it says that the tale of Aphrodisianus has the talking idols, but no 3-day period. So that is unique to this version of that story. In the what's funny is that note that the past statements of the tale of Aphrodisianus are converted to the prophetic future here. So it's being told as past events, now as future events in this prophetic context, which is different. Let's see here. The Slavic rendering which bore a man, which refers to the Virgin Mary, had a broad range of meaning. I'm going to skip that. And then after it says honor will be taken from them and they will remain without glory, this is about like the removing of the magic of the Magi, as was believed that they had. They can't rule or prophesy. And this is mentioned by Justin Martyr, who discusses this idea that the Magi came to see Christ because their magic had stopped working because of his birth. And so they came to figure out, hey, why can't I do magic anymore? Why can't I have my sorceries? The sorcerers travel to the east. And so this is kind of funny. And it ends there, and then the rest of the chapter, verses 26 to 35 onward, are or not with that material. And that ends. And there's not really much to commentate on because this is just a Christian edition using prophecy, mentioning some peculiar things that are to happen at the time of Christ that I've never heard of ever being mentioned, either in Josephus or anybody else. These are very peculiar portents after the fact, to be prophesied after the fact in a period that was in the past, and material from the tale of Aphrodisianus in Slavic form, and of course the crucifixion of Christ, his ascension, in giving Abraham the truth, and so forth. And that ends the ladder of Jacob, a truly convoluted and hard to understand text. And there's a lot of stuff that was in the introduction here, but I'm not going to need to go through it here necessarily, as I've already gone through it one time. But I think I covered everything that was important. But overall, what I think we can get from this text, though, is that even though the Jewish polemical context that this was in that eventually corrupted the text into this atrocious form that we have it, this was probably a very important document had it survived to the modern day. Because again, this is a quasi-apocalyptic text where a chronology of world history is laid out and an expectation of a Messiah king. And all these things are very important for understanding Second Temple Judaism. But sadly, the text has just been destroyed. And along with it, another text that is known, for example, and this is very odd with texts that have to do with Jacob. This is just kind of my little postscript here. Jacob and Joseph, both. There's a text that's known as the History of Joseph that's only been preserved in fragments. There is another text called the, let's see if I can find this, exactly what it was called. The History of Joseph. That was, oh wait, did I just read that one? Say, I'm confusing myself, right? History, yeah, the History of Joseph. And there is also material related to Joseph and Jacob that has been lost or is only in poor form, such as, let's see here, the Prayer of Joseph and the Prayer of Jacob. The Prayer of Joseph is only known in quotations, and the Prayer of Jacob is only in fragments. There's also a Syriac life of Joseph. So Joseph and Jacob, father and son, have a lot of material that has been produced, but has been lost subsequently in history, except for the Testament of Jacob, which was a probably Jewish, but again Christian, edited work in Coptic Egypt. But a lot of material that has to do with Jacob and Joseph that has been lost. I hope you guys enjoyed that and learned something from a very hard to understand text. It's quite sad that it's in that condition. But thankfully we actually have a good amount of material to work with, because some texts, like the Prayer of Joseph that talks about Jacob and the wrestling, spoiling it a little bit, that actually has to do with that, and the wrestling with the angel and everything, is lost. It's completely lost. We only have about 2 or 3 quotations from the text. So some things have not been preserved at all. And this is a rare case where it's been preserved, but in an atrocious form in a commentary. But in a very ironic way, we can thank these Slavic Christians who had an axe to grind with Judaism, who wrote the Polea, wanting to include this. Because had they not done this, we would have lost this document that describes this interesting layout of world history into 12 sections, which also appears in the Apocalypse material in 4th Ezra or 2nd Esdras, and being written by a Jew in the 1st century, a contemporary of Jesus himself, likely, even possibly mentioning the Herodians. So anyway, that was the ladder of Jacob, and I actually just recently read it myself, and this is the second time reading through it. Very interesting. Anyway, so yeah, I guess that's everything. We're gonna cover anything else. I already took care of everything at the beginning of the episode. So, as I said, it's greatly appreciated to do all the algorithm stuff on the different platforms, and I already appreciate everybody who's listening and following the podcast so far. Well, I'm going to head out, and I will see you all on the other side. Hope you have a blessed day and night. I'll see you guys later.